everybody. Welcome back to the Picky Bookworm podcast. I am super, super, super excited for my guest today. His name is Daniel Mazur. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Mazur.
Pretty good. Close enough anyway. It is Mazur though.
Close
Yeah,
enough.
that's
Yay.
good.
Um, so Daniel emailed me, I believe, a couple weeks ago and told me about a new book that he wrote and said that he thought it would be a fun book to talk about here on the podcast. And I agreed. I think it's going to be a super fun book. It's full of encouragement and empowerment. And you guys know I am all about encouraging you guys. So I think this is going to be a really fun chat. We have just spent the past probably 20 minutes or so talking about life and other things. So we are going to let you guys jump in on the conversation as we continue. And we are going to have a lot of fun and a lot of laughs and hopefully lots of encouragement and empowerment for you guys. So grab your tea, grab your wine, grab your laundry, Caroline, and we are going to get started. Daniel, how are you?
Yes, I'm doing fine. Thank you.
I still love your background, all that green.
Yeah,
It's so pretty.
yeah, it's multi-purpose. It's therapeutic for me. My work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine is my blank bedroom wall. We don't, yeah, since we're in a rental apartment, we don't hang pictures on the walls because we don't want to have to cover up holes. So it kind of echoes in here, but it's the only semi-quiet place to record. So
We're good too
that's
here. I
what you
never
guys
asked
get.
you. The sound is coming in okay? Everything's set here?
Sound is
Okay.
sound is coming in great. Yeah.
Okay, good, good.
Yeah, if it wasn't during our 20-minute chat earlier,
You would have
I
said
think
something. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
definitely would have said
Of
something.
course.
So, okay, well, before we jump too far into the weeds, tell us just a little bit about yourself, when you started writing, why you started writing, and just a couple things that inspired you.
Yeah. When
It's
and
always the fun
well,
questions.
though, when and why, right? Why? I don't know if I ever really, I mean, I think about why I do things. I don't know that I really know why I do things truly. I mean, I have ideas. I put some thought into it. When we got to go back about 38 years or so, I've been writing. Well, actually, this is my Beyond the Morning Light is my this book is this is my second book. Okay, it's literary fiction.
That's a
And
pretty cover.
yeah, thank you.
I
Beyond
am
the Morning
such
Light.
a sucker for a good cover.
Yeah, but the first book, which this is based on, it's literary fiction. Really, it's about one day in my life, um, where I fell out of bed. I was homesick, and what I did is I put a lot of events that happened throughout my life as a 17-year-old into that one day. And really, it's based on my first book, which um, I wrote, which is more of a memoir. It's literally a memoir. But when did I write that? I started it in 1988, and it took me 36 years to finish. I've been writing that for 36 years. Why did I write it? So you got the when. The why, the best I can tell you is it was therapy. It was a way for me to try to find some sanity in my life. I had I had just been released from a mental institution. I was committed, and this is the first time I'm having like a dialogue about my life and what I wrote. I've never done this before. This is actually something I've been trying to do for 36 years. And had I had a dialogue back then, like say with my father and my family, I wouldn't have needed to write a book. But I think it was, I started writing. This reminds me, what we're doing right now reminds me of that moment when I was in the mental hospital, actually, just before I was released. I believe it was 2 days before I tried jumping through a window. I was there, right? So yeah. So anyway, I was told by the psychiatrist that my father was going to come to see me. We were going to talk. I was going to have dialogue with my father, which is something I craved for at that time, well, since I was like 12 or so, and at the time I'm like 18, well, no, I think like 21, 22 years old. And I was very excited about that. I'm going to have a dialogue. We're going to talk. We're going to work through things. We're going to find out why I'm here, how I got here, what the problems are. We're going to actually talk. We're going to uncover all these past events and everything and get to the bottom of things, right? But my father didn't show up. So, but I was released not too long after that. And it was a couple of years that it took for me to kind of get back together again. I owned a business at the time when I was in my young age, kind of like my father had done when he was young. But my father, after having a business from being young and all, he became a, so here we go about a conversation we had before this recording started that you don't know about me. My father's a pastor of a church, so I'm a PK, right? A preacher's
Oh,
kid.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That says a lot.
Yeah, so this is considering our 20-minute conversation prior to recording here. This is going to fill in some, you're going to understand why I chuckled a few times from some of the things you had told me, right? So there was a lot going on in my family, okay? And I never had a problem with religion per se, and the non-denominational church that my father had started, which in later years had its school, its hospital outreach, and its food ministry and connections and overseas and with so many people, this, that, and the other. But I had a problem with being expected to follow certain beliefs and behave a certain way when others weren't doing that. I had no problem trying to be honest in being an honest person and all, but in doing that to gain my sanity, I found out that that's not the way it is supposed to go. That wasn't the conformity I was expected to follow. And it created a lot of problems. So I wasn't.
Well, and only being honest because someone expects you to be honest instead of being honest because that's who you are. That's, that's a trouble I think that a lot of PKs run into. And just a quick side note before I let you continue.
Go. I'm all ears.
To a lot of my listeners, just in case you don't know this, maybe a lot of you do, but just in case you don't know this, there's actually statistical research done and studies done into pastors' kids that they tend to have a lot more trouble than kids who are not pastors' kids because of that expectation that is put on them, not just from their parents, but from the other members of the church. You're a PK. You should be acting this way. You're the pastor's child. You should be the most pious of all of them. You're the pastor's kid. You should be perfect. It's this expectation that is put on them, and a lot of them rebel against that. And so there's actually studies done, and there are statistics out there that into pastors' kids compared to kids who are not pastors' kids, that pastors' kids tend to get in a lot more trouble and tend to rebel in a lot more mentally and emotionally dangerous ways. So just in case the listeners did not know that, that is why when you said that you were a PK, I was like, oh, well, that explains a lot. Because it is a statistical probability that if you are a PK, that there's going to be some trouble. Not always, but it is a statistical probability that there's going to be some trouble simply because of that expectation of perfection put on PKs. And they tend to rebel against that because we're human. We rebel against perfection. We don't like it. So, okay, now that I have put that aside there for listeners who may not know certain things, you may continue your story.
Sure, great. I'm glad you said that. I've heard that. I've read that. But I don't necessarily believe that it fits my narrative. went the other way because first of all, it wasn't that faults were found in me. Like I never had a drug problem with the police. I did, quite the opposite. I started a business. I was responsible. I hired people. I did very well in many things, right? But the reason I really had a problem with expectations and all was really very simple. Um, from being very, very young, I come from a very close family. My mother's a very warm person, comes from a big Italian family. Pictures went on the youth at the farm, all around the table, and everyone together, and community and family was all about that. And I think that's one of the things that really drew my father to my mother years ago when he met her when she was 17 and he was 20. Also, they got married like a year later, so they were very young when they got married. But my father was fairly controlling, and as I said, I believe it was his closeness that drew my father to my mother. My father came from a very distant family. He was one of like 5 siblings, and he was raised by his stepfather. But of all of his siblings the stepfather was their actual biological father. So the little bit I know about my father's siblings is that it was bad. It was just all bad, and it was all terrible, and it was just all bad news. In fact, of the few times I met them, one of his brothers, I asked him at the table. I says, you know, I asked him. I wanted to know because I was always very inquisitive, right? So I'm asking him, I was like, "What do you think about the situation you're with my father being your half brother?" And he's like, "What do you mean? He's not my half brother." I was like, "What do you mean he's not your half brother? I mean, look at you. You've got blonde hair, blue eyes. He's got dark features. His father was Italian. Your father and your mother both Polish." And he just like shook it off. And to this day, I don't even know if they realize that my father's their half brother, right? And then I don't even know if it's true. I mean, everything is kind of like that. But the crux of it all, though, the real problem was that I was raised very close to my mother, as my siblings were. We were very tight with my mother. We always did things together as a family, with my mother, with her sister, and everything, right? And it was as this church grew, and control factors got into play, that little by little, the cousins that from my mother's side and all that started the church and all, they kind of, one's leaving the board, another one. And my father was taking more and more control of the situations, like with the church. And less of our family we maintained involvement with. Everyone was getting cut off. So it ended up getting to the point where my grandparents, which we'd see every week, my grandmother would be at the house with my mother making jam in the basement and doing whatever, right? Always with the family doing things. All of a sudden, they were thrown out of the church and couldn't be seen anymore. And there's a whole story behind that, right? But when that happened, when it got that close to our family, I went to my father and I says, "I know I'm expected to no longer have any relationship with my grandparents anymore, and I'll fall in line. I'll do it just like you expect my siblings to do." But I said to him, "You got to tell me what drugs they did, or who they're selling drugs to, or what child they molested. I mean, you got to give me something to go on here that validates that extreme action." He couldn't give me anything, so I just refused to fall in line with that. And I had an idea what the consequences would be, but I just, I don't want to live myself like that. I couldn't find any reason that I could cut them off. They were always the nicest people in the world to me and everyone else that I knew. And I was catching on to ideas of why they were gone and all this whole control thing that was going on. So anyway, they got cut out, and eventually my father put the same maneuver on me, and I was thrown out of the family. And I got 2 brothers, 2 sisters. So they were all told that they can't have anything to do with me anymore, my mother and all of them. And when it happened that day, which of course they wrote about in the book here, COR Values, I wrote about it. The day that happened, I'm like, okay, this is bad. This is all terrible and all, but calm minds will prevail. This will blow over. We'll eventually sit down and talk, work this thing through. So that mindset went on for like 2.5 years. And everything I did, calling my sister up, "Look at Debbie, I'd just like to see you. Pam, I'm like, be my sister, Pam. There's something going on between Dad and we'll work it out." "Oh, no, if you don't get things right with Dad, then we can't talk to you." I get that from my sisters, my brothers, my mother. No one would have anything to do with me. So I had an existential crisis, right? I didn't know who I was. My identity was, I'm my brother's brother, I'm my mother's son, I'm my father's son. This is who I am. This is my identity, right? Boy, was I wrong, right? So I'm going into myself, trying to figure things out. And I got really, really lost to the point where I was screwing up my business. I was writing things on chalkboards to my clients. And I got to the point where I actually lost control of my thoughts. And I had to be committed. And rightfully so. I was committed to a mental institution like 2.5 years after that. And I was in real trouble. And I guess this is a long answer to your question. Why did I start writing? Well, when I eventually got out of that hospital and all, I did it to get my mind back, to get back in control of my thoughts, to have some order, right? And ever since then, and for 36 years, no, it's really not the narrative that you presented, because I was damn determined to do everything right, to show everyone that I didn't have a drug problem. I wasn't a bad guy. I was going to make sure the community spoke nicely of me, that I treated people good with kindness and fairness, that I didn't judge people, that I did all the things to people that I would have wanted them to do for me and to me, right? I did that for others, and this is kind of an experiment. And at the cost, even in terms of business, I've had my own business since I was very young. And I kind of did this experimental thing too, where you know what, I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to cheat, I'm not going to take all these shortcuts to get ahead like I saw my father was doing it all right. So I wanted to stay on track and do things right. And you know what, if it doesn't work out, fine. But you know what, I'm going to learn something. I'm going to find out if I can be an honest man, if I can be all those things that I expected my father to be, that he wasn't, right? So I did all of that. And so many times I was at a crossroads, having thought, I didn't have to be that truthful with this one. I could have just said this and made this excuse, and I could have been just fine and all. But, I came out and said, hey, I screwed up. This is really my fault, and I don't know how I'm going to get out of it. But you know what? I'm going to take you to lunch. We're going to talk about it. I'm going to see this thing through. I'm going to do right. And every time that I did that, I didn't know how I was going to get better or be okay. But it always happened. And I wrote about so many examples of that in my book, where I owed people, like one person $10,000 when I first came out of Florida. I didn't know how I was going to get out of it. Then Hurricane Andrew hit, and all these opportunities, talk about, I don't want to say that a disaster like that, something good came out of it. But man, I lived right in a homestead 3 days before Hurricane Andrew hit. And I didn't know the day before that I wasn't going to be living there anymore. And I had already lived there for 2 years. And just circumstances were such that I had to move to North Miami in Miami Lakes. And I don't know if you remember much about Hurricane Andrew back in 1992, but it was destined.
Yeah, I was like,
you're
11 years old.
I'm 63, so okay.
Yeah.
It was bound right for Miami Lakes. I'm like, oh my God. I moved into a hurricane, and I'm going to get wiped out and lose everything. But if you track the news, you look this thing up, it took a beeline right at the last minute, and it hit right over Naranja Lakes where I lived. And I visited people there. The military would let me through because I had a driver's license that showed I lived there still, all right? The building I was in, the condominium, my condominium, and every neighbor, there wasn't even a roof on it. It was just walls. And they had tents that they were living in inside of. I would have lost everything. So, for the most part, I consider it coincidence, but some way, somehow, things always worked out for me, But, this was the whole thing. I've been fighting for 36 years to have a relationship with my family, with my mother, my father. I used to write him, call him. I called pastors in Syracuse, a bunch of them. They all got together and they reached out to talk to my father and say, hey, your son approached us. We had a meeting with him. He would really like to talk with you. And we feel that, we could help counsel in this. And they quoted some scriptures, whatever. And can we all get together and try to work through this? But, that wouldn't work. That he wouldn't have that. He wouldn't do it with them. He wouldn't do it with the psychiatrist when I was in the institution. And then, of course, he would preach about how it's wrong to work with psychiatrists and to deal with psychiatry and your mind and thinking, and you got to trust in God and have faith, right? But of course, when I was out of the institution, there was a psychiatrist that went to his church, and he had him call me, and he wanted him to be my outside of the institution therapist, right, for my weekly visits. So I entertained the idea, and I wrote about this in the book. Where I'll tell you this one story, and then maybe I'm going on too long. I don't know here. But so I met with him, right? So I sat with him, Master Leo, and we talked. And it got to the point in our one of our first initial conversations where I said, Dr. Master Leo, how bad a shape am I in? How do you really feel about how I am? Do I really need this therapy? And he tells me, he says, well, Daniel, he says, your situation is very, very serious. You know, you could, if you don't get therapy, if you try to go about this on your own and don't get the right help, the right therapy, you can be in some serious trouble here. And I'm like, well, what kind of trouble? Like life-threatening trouble? And he says to me, he says, actually, yes, this could, your life could, you might not make it. Literally, it's that bad. This is very, very severe. I says, okay. I says, that's very interesting. So I told him this. I says, I'll tell you what, I'll make a deal with you. I says, well, you just told me that you believe the situation is very dire, that my life kind of depends on this here, right? It's like, yeah. I says, did you tell my father all this? And have you had this discussion with him? Well, yeah, I mean, it's your father that had me come and see him. I says, okay. He says, here's the deal. I says, I'll make a deal with you. I'll come and see you for therapy in one condition. He's like, well, what's that? If you go with my father and do two things, you tell him, number one, what you just told me, that this is pretty much my life depends on getting good therapy to be okay. I might not make it if I don't have therapy. That's what you told me, right? He says, yes. I says, will you do that? He says, yes. And I says, and he's like, what's the second condition? Second condition is, I want him to pay for half my therapy. I said, like that. I know my father, right? And my father's he's a game player and all, right? He doesn't believe in psychiatry. He wanted his hand in this. He wanted to have to control the situation. I know what's going on. And I wanted to teach this lesson. As much as I was out of my mind, there were parts that were very much in control, right? And I wanted to show this guy this, right? So he says, okay. I says, okay, so I'll see you next week. And by then, hopefully you'll have had the chance to talk to my father and you can tell me what happened. So I see him the following week and we talk a little bit, just a little small talk. And I says, so did you have the talk with my father? And I says, yeah. He says, yeah. I says, well, did you tell him that, did you make the two very distinct points that I wanted to make clear with him? Did you tell him that this is very life-threatening, that my well-being, my life, may very well depend on getting the right counseling with someone such as you? He says, yes, I did. And did you tell him that I would see you if he was willing to pay for half the therapy? And he says, yes, I did. I says, what did he say? He says, he won't do it. I says, oh, okay, well, have a nice day. I went and got my coat and left.
Yeah, therapy, I was actually in therapy for 14 and a half months, the year that my husband and I got married. And best decision I ever made. Like, I will tell people all day long, therapy, if you even have an inkling that you might need therapy, find a good therapist and go. Best decision I ever made. Find one that you connect with. Don't just, pick a random therapist. You want to make sure that it's somebody that you connect with. But it was the best decision that I had made, because, she was incredible and she helped so much to process through a lot of the trauma that, you and I had discussed some of that before we recorded. And, she had helped me process through a lot of that. And, because, one thing that happened was, when my husband proposed, I realized that I did not want to go into my marriage with the emotional baggage that I had. Because I knew if I carried that emotional baggage that I had, that my marriage would probably not survive. And I did not want that to happen. I loved this man and I wanted to make sure that it worked. And he had been, so supportive and just so amazing. And when I told him that I wanted to start therapy and told him why, he was incredible. He was like, okay, find one. And,
you two went together or you went solo?
I went solo. he um tried he had gone to a psychiatrist several years ago. He'd gone to psychiatrists in the past, but he had gone several years ago, and she had done some unethical research into his past, and basically like brought it up with him to talk about at his first visit. And he basically came home, and it was basically what it was a paper that had been written about him. And I'm not going to go into all of the details because this is all public. But it had been a paper that had been written about him, and she had found it and wanted to talk about it at his first visit. And he, came home from that appointment, and he was like, yeah, I'm not going back. And I was like, why? And he goes, because I'm not going to be the subject of her next paper. And, because that was what it felt like to him. He was like, it felt like she was trying to use me for another
Yep.
paper.
Mm.
And, and it was just, he was like, it just felt very skeevy. And, and I was like, that's, and I just kind of looked at him and I was like, yeah, that's unethical, borderline illegal, what she did.
But that was public information that she found to discuss with him in private about?
It was public information, but it was anonymous. So, and it was from years ago. Like
Okay.
he was, let's see, 44 when we married, and he was in college when it was written. So it was like 24 years old. So she had to go searching for it. And it was, we're here in Oklahoma, and he went to college in New York. So she had to go searching. It wasn't just something where she could like type in his name and it would just pop up. She had to go searching for it. And so it was, it may have been public information, but it wasn't just easily found public information. It was something that she would have had to go searching for in order
Okay.
to find it about him. And so it wasn't quite illegal. It wasn't something that we could actually sue her about. It wasn't like HIPAA breaches or anything like that. But it was unethical. It was definitely unethical,
Okay.
the way that she handled it all. And so, I just, I told him, I was like, that's fine. I said, you don't have to go, I'm not going to force you to do something that you don't want to do. I said, but, we need to make sure that we stay in communication, and that, when things aren't right, or when things don't feel good for you, that you communicate that to me so that I can help you through it. I said, because I'm not a mind reader. I was like, you have to tell me when things don't feel right for you, because I can't help you if I don't know. And so, he, again, before we hit record, we were talking about, his actions and words and everything. And that was, one of those things that he has held true to. And, he has stayed in communication. And, when things don't feel right for him, he is, he's very, very good about coming to me and, just letting me know, hey, things don't feel right. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about it. And, let's either find a solution, or, let's, just, kind of keep an eye on things, or, however we want to handle it. And so, it's that, that's worked for us. And and after what happened to him, I can't say that I blame him at all for not wanting to go back. Because if I had had that same experience, I probably would have been a little gun shy myself. I'd have been like, okay, if this person found it, how am I going to know if the next person doesn't do the same thing, you know?
Well, as far as therapy goes, I mean, it's a field, right? And like in any field, you're going to have good or bad actors, right?
Yeah.
And the other part of therapy, as it relates to this discussion, um, look, I live in Miami. If I want to go to New York, I could fly there. I could drive there. I could ride a bicycle there. I could walk there, right? So maybe what I did was I walked. What I'm talking about is kind of self therapy, which was my writing. That's what I turned to. I mean, I had a few therapists that I started to talk to, and I'm not saying that because I didn't go through the route of therapy that I wrote that is the right way of doing anything. I don't know what right or wrong is. For all I know, if I dealt with a therapist, I could have got with a decent one, and maybe things would have turned out much better for me, much more quickly. Who knows?
Yeah.
All I can say is what I know to be fact, and that is what I did, my history, right? So I
Yeah.
wrote, and I wrote, and I wrote, and I wrote. I wrote a lot, and I've been writing for 36 years, and there was no real ending to it until 35, whatever years later, when I got the final call from my father. There were only 3 times over 36 years that I got a response from my father, and it was always the same words. And I had found out that it's the same words that he used for another sibling of mine, which is a whole nother story. This is with Pam, okay?
Not me.
But the
Different
words
Pam.
were 4 words. I'm not ready yet. Right? So when he was finally ready, was about 4 or 5 days before he died, I finally got a phone call. He calls me up 3 years ago, and he says to me, and I always told him, I said, look, whenever you're ready to talk, I'll fly up there the same day. I'll come see you, whatever. You know, I really want to talk. We really we need to communicate. Communication's everything in business and in families and relationships. But you got to talk. And, you know, and I'm a person that likes to argue. When I say that, it's not really, I don't mean it the way a lot of people take it. What I mean by I like to argue with people is I like to talk about things that we don't have in common, that we maybe even disagree on, but in a respectful way and all. I mean, that's an opportunity for me to learn, and maybe the other person I'm talking to, right? Those are the best moments of my life. There's a professor that I used to know. He passed. He was used to go to FIU, and he was the editor of Miami Herald, right? So there was this pub, and he's Irish, this Irish pub. We used to be there to 3, 4 in the morning, and all we would do is argue and argue. Whatever we could find that we disagree on, we would just go at each other. We loved it. It was a great time. I really miss those moments, you know.
That's honestly some of my favorite conversations are ones that I have with people that I don't agree with. The way that I put it is I will debate all day long, but the moment it turns into an argument is when I'm out. Because, you know, to me, a debate is a rational conversation between two people who don't agree. An argument is a conflict. But, you know, and that's the way that I see it. You know, again, everybody sees things differently, and you can have a respectful argument. That is entirely
colloquial
possible. You
use
can
of
do
the
that
word too.
without,
of
you know, you can have an argument without raising your voice. You can have an argument without yelling and screaming and, you know, all of that. But, you know, that is the way that I see it, and that is the way that I phrase it, is I will debate all day long. But the moment it turns into an argument, the moment somebody's voice raises, I'm done.
Right.
Because I won't argue with somebody. If we don't agree, we don't have to agree. I don't care if we agree. But we're not going to argue about something that we don't agree on. We can discuss things that we don't agree on. We can debate things that we don't agree on. But I will not argue about something that we don't agree on. I won't do it. I will not argue with somebody that I don't agree with, because arguing doesn't change anybody's minds.
Not a vengeful, not a confrontational argument. Agreed.
Right, not a confrontational argument, which, you know, does not sound like what you would have with your friend at all, you know. So.
Never did with him. But to continue, right, where I left off. So my father.
Yeah, sorry.
No, totally fine. It's open conversation. We can go wherever, right? We can segue, whatever. So I get the call from my father. and it was a Friday, and I just had a grueling day. Picked up a new client. I was with my guys way up north from here. I'm driving home. It's late at night. I'm completely run down and exhausted. My phone rings. It's my brother David, who of course doesn't talk to me. But he says, and I pick up the phone, my cell phone. I answer. He says, hello. And I didn't click that it was my brother. It took a couple times because, my brother's never calling me, right? He said, well, Dad wants to see you and talk to you. He says, this is David. I said, oh, David. Well, Dad wants to see you and talk to you. I said, well, okay, put him on. He says, well, I can't right now. He's in the hospital, and I'm going to reach out to someone, and he's going to call you from there. Someone's with him. I says, okay, of course I'll pick up. So I get the call back. 15 minutes or so later, I just walked in the door of my home here. And it's my father on the phone. Now, at that point, I haven't talked to him in, 10, whatever years. I haven't heard his voice, right? So I'm like, oh, Dad, hello. He says, okay. He says, my father says to me, son, he says, I would just like you to know that I would have liked to have seen you. And it would have been good to see you. But it's okay. And I understand you don't want to have anything to do with me or to see me and all. And it's okay. I understand and I respect. I go, whoa. I says, whoa, back it up. I said, well, wait a minute here. Are you telling me you would like to see me? And then he says, like, son, I would just like to put my arms around you and just tell you I love you, son. He's like very warm in all way. I says, fine, fair enough. That's all I need to hear. I'll see you in the morning. I told him like that, right? So he says, oh, yeah. And he's all excited, very nice. So hung up the phone. Got my stuff together, Of course, I didn't sleep all night, and I'm wondering how am I going to talk to him. Thought about all of my flight up there and everything, and I went up there and I spent time with my father. I spent like 8 hours with him that day. It's very interesting though, because it's like the third time that I was able to meet with him. Earlier times that he gave in and was willing to see me, he would be there with like the assistant pastor, but I wasn't allowed to talk to my father. I had to speak through the assistant pastor. My father wouldn't talk to me on that meeting. Right? That was one of the other rare moments that I was able to be in the same room with him, right? So when I go there at the hospital, of course, I'm assuming there's going to be a bodyguard or someone to watch over me because, I'm evil and all that stuff, right? So, but no one's there. And I'm like, what's going on? And I wrote this in such detail in the book. I took this whole thing apart. And this part of the book, by the way, the book is kind of thick. This first book, look at these two books.
Yeah, I saw that.
This one's fairly thin. Look, right? Look at this. Here's the other one, right? This is 588 pages. This is 176. And this was condensed. This is the condensed version, right? So anyway,
that's a lot of therapy.
I go there to see him, but I'm like, I go check in the desk, and I'm like, checked in at the desk. It's like, well, who else is here? It's like, well, no one. It's just you. What do you mean, just me? I just completely wouldn't expect that, right? Well, a few years ago, what was going on? Right? It's like that's when COVID really kicked in, right? You can't have but one guest at a time, only one person. He had no choice.
Oh,
if he was going to see me, it could only be me. So I'm like, oh my goodness. And they wouldn't. And I got there early, so they wouldn't let me in right away. So I had to leave there, and I went up to SU where I used to hang out and had some pizza at a pizzeria there with someone shop that I used to go to. So I had like a couple hours to think about it before I went back. And I went back and I spent time with him. And I was with him for 8 hours talking. And it was the hardest thing to write about. Look, I don't consider myself a writer. I wrote because I do things I'm compelled to do. I'm kind of like I don't see myself as an author. I see myself as more of a nuclear reactor. I react to things, in a big way.
Button do?
Right? So, that's me, It's like, it's this, I have kind of had no choice. It was, but I got sanity out of writing this book. It was like, I had no idea I was writing a book. What I was writing was just about all these little pieces, like pieces to a puzzle. I get a chunk here, a chunk there. And there's something about writing it down that after you do, you look at it and you're like, oh. And then you look at it, oh, and this. But, when you're thinking about this stuff, you don't have that moment of clarity about those chunks at the same time. But when you write it and you look at those, like, oh, and then all of a sudden you see how different chunks go together. It's like putting a puzzle together. You're like, oh, well, those pieces don't quite fit, but this does. Oh, and look at this, right? So that goes on for like 36 years. And then you get a kind of sanity coming back because things make sense and you're understanding more about people. This and that. Any type of introspection, I imagine, or time with therapy, or if anyone's really trying to put their emotions and feelings aside and try to get to the nuts and bolts of what really is going on, which also has to do with the title of this book. It's not a typo, COR, but it is a made up word, but it's from an acronym. COR is an acronym for comfort over reality, as I call it, right? It's like this idea that I found. I've had like 100 or more different titles for this book as I've been writing it and deciding it was going to turn into a book, right? I ended up with that because this is a word that I came up with, in that, everyone has their idea of what I have. I try my best to come up with what reality is. And I think the way to do the better job that I can do in that is to take my comfort out of it. The truth is the truth. Reality is what it is. It has no agenda or anything, right? But I've noticed that so many people create an environment in a world that they live within that they call reality, which is so all too often based on things that people do or expect from them that is comfortable for them. I mean, you talk about religion, for example. So I hear people talk about, well, you know what? I'm going to join this particular reason because it'll do this for me. That, and I like the people and the way they're treating in this. And I think to myself, okay, that's all nice and everything, but what does it have to do with whether that's real or true or not? Right? Yeah. I mean, and that doesn't make what they're doing wrong in my book or anything like that. But in getting my sanity back, first of all, my comfort was gone already anyway. So comfort, I mean, what But
comfort.
So in a way, it was for my own comfort that I was seeking, right? Because I wanted to be able to think again, to have my thoughts in order, to have sanity in my life, to have order in my life and what I was doing, to get back to business and to function properly and all, not to be walking around just wandering people, with drool dropping from my mouth, which was going on for a while, stuff like that, right? So I saw my father. We had this nice experience, and that was the end. So I had an ending for my book, which I titled "COR Values: Comfort Over Reality," which I thought was pretty apropos considering my family and what they've really been doing all of these years. And how ironic is this, though, right? Because I would think people would say to me, so Dan, you say that you're really into family and you want to connect with your family, and you've been doing it trying at this effort at it for 36 years. Well, for crying out loud, Dan, you come from a Christian family. Your father's a pastor. All you had to do was oh, you must be a terrible guy. It's so much deeper than that.
People
oh my goodness!
See the look on your face right now.
Yeah, well, maybe they will, right? I don't know. Who knows what you're going to do with this video, but yeah. I mean, but it's really amazing. My father did very well in business, and he did in terms of being a financial success. Okay, if you want to, use that bar. Then he did very well in the religious sector as a pastor. Very big things are continuing there. But even to this day, I have a website, and I communicate with the assistant pastor who I have a history with, who also wouldn't talk to me and all these things that I've been craving to do, because I know other people that as you talked to me earlier and you told me things that have happened to you in certain experiences. I don't want to volunteer information to the group here, but in these different environments where people get together in these communities, right? Things can happen. And at times there can be situations of control where people can really take situations and turn them into something they're not, or take someone that they might consider to be a troublemaker, or maybe a whistleblower or whatever, who knows, right? And that doesn't fit in with what we're doing here. So let's make him this, and we'll project him to be this, and he doesn't say he's a born-again Christian and all. If you talk with him, if you give him your ear, oh, look out. You may backslide or things can happen. I mean, these kind of things at least happen to me, right? And still go on this way today. People won't even look at my book, or people in the church are very aware of my book, but many of them, from what I hear of a few people in the church that are bold enough to talk to me regularly and tell me about what's going on with other people that still go there. People will not read the book because they're told it's a vindictive thing. I'm trying to take down my father. I'm trying to attack the church. and I'm trying to bring everything down, and it's all like that. But what it really is it's a very strong attempt on my part to just tell the story of what had happened since I was very young and what I know, and let people decide and see it for whatever they want to see it as and make their own determination. But it would be very nice if they judged me on that firsthand experience with me of who I am, because
Yeah.
I visited that place so many times. And I got people, look at when I went to my father's funeral and I came back, I got things in the mail like tracts saying, oh, you got to you got to ask God for repentance and all. Here's this tract, right? Here's the Christian that goes to this church that goes to heaven, and here's the sinner like you that ends up in hell, and you don't want to go to hell, do you? I mean, I just came back from my father's funeral, and I'm getting stuff like this in the mail, right? And I get people coming up to me and say, oh, while I was there after his service, oh, I've been really thinking about you, and the Lord put it on my heart to tell you this and that about what you've been doing, and how you can, what would be better for you. And these people don't even know me. They've never even had a conversation with me in their life, but they come to me like they've known me all their lives for decades. And even while I'm there, I'm sure you're familiar, as you say that, I don't know if you mind my saying, you went to a non-denominational church, which is what my father's church was, all right? Speaking in tongues, familiar with that?
Uh-huh.
You heard that?
Yeah.
So even while I was there, that was done. And I got people coming, oh, that was about you, Like, these people don't even know me. They don't even know me. And it's like if someone out of that whole congregation in the dozens of years that I was gone, and when I was in a mental hospital and the things I went through, and it's not the woe is me deal either. But if you're going to say all this stuff about me and judge me and all, right? How are you going to do that without ever having a conversation with me in your life? And you're just going by what you've been told by other people, right? I mean,
that's things, those are things that have always bothered me too. And, I don't necessarily want, to, to the listeners, this discussion is not, we are not sitting here bashing religion, and we are not sitting here bashing Christianity and things like that. We are not doing that at all. But there are a lot of you out there that do have these issues with Christians and with the church. And so I do want to ask you this. We have about probably 13 minutes left or so. I do want to ask you, what are some things, because I know that, when we started recording, that I promised some encouragement. What are some things that you would like to say to encourage everybody, and especially your fellow indie authors, as they write their books? Because they don't necessarily write the memoirs or the nonfiction or anything like that. But what is something that you would like to say to encourage them through their own nuclear reactor projects?
Hey, and on that too, there's something I definitely want to say that's encouraging. Okay,
Sure.
you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, all this having been said, and the book being what it is, both of them and all, right? And okay, so maybe we're not laughing here and, it's all jovial and all fun, right? But let me tell you something. In hindsight, after all of this, I mean, ask me if I would have it any other way, my past and all. Do I wish it was anything else? You know what? I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't for the things I went through. Everyone's heard it said that, every cloud has its silver lining. I am who I am today. I have had the opportunities, although I otherwise would have never had. I have abilities today that I take with me and I benefit from so very much because of what I've been through. I wouldn't change it for the world. I have so many opportunities, and I've had so many opportunities afforded me because of what I've been through, and because of the way I've looked at it and addressed it. I am not a victim, right? And this is something like I've tried to share with my sister Pam, right? Because my sister Pam, you're my second sister Pam, but my biological sister Pam
Besties.
is like, oh my goodness, no one has had it as bad as I have, it's just, Dan, you're, I know what you've been through and all, but me has been so much worse. And I've never wanted to give her that message. Everything I've ever talked to her about and everything I'm saying here today, it's not, oh, well, it's me, I've had it so bad and all, right? Because nonsense. These have all been opportunities for me to become a better person, to do more for myself and others because of it. Because I've looked at these as challenges, and I've learned so much from that, you know.
Yeah.
And I've tried to tell my sister, and I wrote about this in the book too. I've tried to portray her like, Pam, no, don't look at it that way. Maybe yours is, maybe whatever. Sure, okay, but you can. The glass is half full. If there's that halfway line in the glass, that means you've got a choice. You can look at it as half full or half empty. Who wants to choose to go through their life thinking that it's half empty? No, it's half full. Why not be positive and look at the brighter side, the advantages and everything, instead of focusing on the doom and gloom? There is so much opportunity in every moment of defeat that I've ever been through that I wrote about, that I think is very encouraging, and I really wanted to say that.
And I will say too that, and I've told my husband this so many times, that you guys, my guests, over the past 4 years, my editing clients, my listeners, everybody, you guys can thank my husband for the Picky Bookworm. Because this would not be what it is without his support and encouragement. And I would not be the person that I am without him. But at the same time, along the same lines as what you were saying, I don't think that I would have been able to accept him in my life if I had not been through what I had been through. And so there's, as we go through life, all of our experiences, traumatic or otherwise, they turn us into a person. And whether that person is a good person, whether that person is a bad person, whether that person is a traumatized person, whether that person is a sane person, whether that, all of those things, our experiences turn us into a person. And it is our choices that help us determine what kind of person those experiences turn us into. My experiences in my past could have turned me into I could have gone down a pretty bad road based on my childhood experiences. My husband could have gone down a really bad road based on his childhood experiences. You could have gone down a really bad road based on your childhood experiences. But it's our choices and it's our free will that, allows us to choose who those experiences turn us into and where those experiences take us. So that is my word, I guess, of encouragement for everybody today is don't let your bad experiences turn you into a bad person. I guess would be my word of, just, you don't have to be a victim. You don't have to be a bad person because you've had bad experiences. You don't have to be a traumatized person because you've been traumatized. You can rise above all of that. And, one of my favorite quotes is, we all rise we all rise when we lift each other, I think is what the quote is. And that's a lot of what I'd like to do here at the Picky Bookworm is lift others. And, lift authors and, just allow all of you guys to shine, whenever possible. So what were you going to say?
Yeah, also nothing I want to add that I think is very good to say. I have a great relationship with my mother now. I see her all the time up in New York, and my brother Paul. I've met all these nephews and nieces. They're all adults now, but I've got a relationship with them. I flew them down for a Miami Heat game. I got great seats for them and all. They not the Heat, the football game, the Dolphins. I'm not a big sports fan, but for them, I'm involved in work. My life is my company, right? So this is the thing though. Think about it. Think about it. My mother, I could have been very. My mother is very. My mother's a nurturing, soft type. She's whatever. I could excuses whatever. I could have been bitter. I could have said, we're done and all right. But I was ready for my father to have a relationship with him, with any of them, and just put it in the past. My mother right now, I've got a great relationship with. I see her all the time. But this is the thing too, though. You can't hold on to this stuff. If someone does you wrong, that's really, really bad. Maybe it's right or not. I don't know. To hold on, to try to hope that can be fixed and restored. All I know is that in my situation, I could speak the history of it. With my mother, I didn't hold on to the bitterness. She came to her senses. She has a relationship now with me that she could have always had. So I didn't have it for, decades. But I have it now. And she's 84 years old now, and I treasure every moment with her. I'm going to see her again in a couple of weeks. She's flying down here to see my aunt and uncle who live in Homosassa, which is a 4.5 hour drive for me. I'm going to go spend some time with them and my sister. My other sister, Debbie. That's my older sister. So not holding on to bitterness and forgiveness. And you've got, it's funny because what I have with her now, it goes back to like when I was 12 years old, when she looked out for me and she was able to, be with me in a way that her natural instinct was all the way up to when I was 12, that left after that. It's back to that. And I thought I'd never see that again with my mother, but I've got it back. And I appreciate every moment. And I just take every moment for the moment, And in a way, don't look back. But in a way, always look back too. Because there's lessons to learn from, right?
Yeah.
So we don't fall into the same mistakes that we made. I've made plenty of mistakes, And I just don't want to repeat them, right?
Yeah.
And appreciate what I have. The glass is half full.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've only got a couple minutes left. Where can people hang out with you online?
Like I said, I'm not really your typical author. I don't hang out online. I just happen to write a couple of books, okay? But you can get them from Amazon. You can write me anytime. You could put my email address, whatever. I mean, Dan at computeritsolutions.net. That's plural. Dan at computeritsolutions.net. If you write me, I write back. You can have my cell number. Call me any day or time. If I don't call you back, it's because I'm either sleeping or I'm busy with something, and I'll call you back when I'm available. So happy to talk. My website, corvalues.net, C-O-R-V-A, COR Values, corvalues.net, corvalues.net. There. And the books, you can just put in my name, Daniel Robert Mazur, and I come up, my 2 books are there from Amazon. So, okay.
Awesome. Okay, well, I will be sure to put all of that in the podcast description, and including your website. Do you have a newsletter that you send out? No? Okay.
Maybe
totally,
up and
totally
coming.
fine.
So,
I will.
Pam, this is my first podcast. Okay,
Almost everybody's first podcast.
Is it really?
So,
okay, so I've never done this before. And look, I'm the guy that likes to sit in the back of the room to shut my mouth and watch and learn. Okay, I'm not the one that likes to be up front, talking and being watched.
Well, you did a great job.
You
did a great job talking. I almost never had to talk, so it's great.
No, but you did talk too, though, Pam.
I talk too.
You can talk a little bit.
But normally, I'm the one worried that I talk too much.
Yeah.
So,
okay, Pam.
Well, it was.
But what you had to say was very
fantastic.
good and very worth listening to.
I'm sorry.
But what you did say was very worth listening to and very good to hear.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Most
Well,
definitely.
it was an absolute honor and blast having you.
Oh, so it was some fun.
There was some fun.
Okay, we laughed a little bit, right? Yeah.
I will definitely have to have you back.
Great.
Let me know when you write your next book.
Will do.
And we are recording this on Saturday. I will typically publish tomorrow on Sunday in time for everybody's Monday morning commute. So hopefully I won't forget like I did last week. Last week I forgot to like Sunday night at 6 to publish. Hopefully I will get it up earlier in the day tomorrow for everybody. But I will definitely let you know when I get that published. So that you can send everybody you know to go listen. But again, thank you so much. It was an absolute
And real
blast,
quick, as you did mention, I am in the
listening
middle
to
of writing my next book. It's titled When She Let Go. It's kind of an exploration of what would have happened in my life if things were different. I'm in the middle of writing. That will be
nice.
done this year, so I know it will be published this year.
Nice. Okay. Well, let me know when it's done, and I will
Will
definitely
do.
have you back.
Okay, Pam.
So, okay. Well, thank you again for joining me this week, and I will talk to you soon.
And Skype never cut out.
It didn't. I'm so happy. Yeah, it's because I told you in advance.
Yes, very good.
I'm telling you.
Very good.
Anyway, thanks
Okay.
again, Daniel, for
Same,
joining
Pam.
me this week.
Thank you very much for
And
having me.
I
It was a
will.
pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Pam.
And I will talk to you soon.
Very good. Looking forward to it.
Bye.
Bye-bye.